Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. 'Tis the season of giving as Operation Christmas Hope gets underway. Plus, a special flag raising in honor of the Métis people also raises concern about the upcoming Constitution vote. And horror in the sky at a Dallas air show during a Veterans Day ceremony over the weekend.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks for joining us. As the Emergencies Act inquiry heads into its fifth week, the first federal representative took the stand today. Rob Stewart, the former Deputy Minister of Public Safety, says the Ontario government left it up to the City of Ottawa and federal government to work together to deal with the convoy protests that gridlocked Ottawa for 3 weeks this past January and February. Stewart says the Ontario Provincial Police rose to the occasion, but the province was more engaged in the blockade at the Ambassador Bridge between Windsor and Detroit because of the economic impact. In related news, the inquiry has released documents showing that the director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Services, or CSIS, didn't think protesters at the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa posed a threat to Canada's security, and there was no signs of foreign interference. But Stewart told the inquiry today that CSIS used different criteria to define threats to national security, and the cabinet decided the threshold to invoke the Emergencies Act had been met. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrived in Bali, Indonesia, and promoted Canada to investors gathered ahead of the G20 summit.
When we support the middle class, when we put people at the center of our policies, we create the conditions for growth and the consensus to make real change on issues that matter to everyone.
Among climate change, Trudeau will also push leaders to further isolate Russia, saying its war in Ukraine is creating a food and energy crisis. Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health says he's discussing and reviewing bringing back a mask mandate in the province's schools again. For now, Dr. Kieran Moore is strongly recommending everyone wear a mask in all indoor public places to protect children from COVID-19, the flu and respiratory syncytial virus, also known as RSV. He says what might be a cold to an adult can lead to a severe respiratory infection in a child 4 and under. Quebec's College of Physicians is recommending people wear masks in public places, crowded private spaces, and on public transit. Meanwhile, children's hospitals across Alberta are seeing an influx of young patients who are sick and some who are seriously ill. At least 2 hospitals say that they're battling waves of kids with influenza, RSV, and common colds. An aggravating factor for the parents is a lack of children's Tylenol and Advil on pharmacy shelves. Lethbridge pharmacist Vishul Sukadia with the medicine shop says that there's no need to panic when it comes to getting your hands on the pills. The pharmacy can compound their own concoction.
The raw material is still available, and what the pharmacy can deliver, what we are doing as a pharmacy, that we are compounding the children's Advil and Tylenol with the flavor what clients love, what the kids like. So and it is covered by the most insurances too, because of the shortages. So it's just the parents, they don't have to panic. They just ask the pharmacy to compound it, and yeah.
Sukadia adds pharmacies are currently experiencing a nationwide shortage of most children's antibiotics. Conservatives led question period in the House of Commons today with concerns about the supply of children's pain medications across Canada. Tory leader Pierre Poilievre asked why the government allowed the shortage to get this bad when other countries are not having similar issues. Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos says the government recently secured more children's painkillers for drugstores across Canada. That's on top of a previously announced shipment of medicines destined for hospitals. Meanwhile, Alberta's opposition NDP is pushing for the province to implement an emergency public health plan due to the shortage of children's medications, as well as the spike in illnesses and the absenteeism affecting schools. According to MLA Rocky Pincholi of Edmonton, 4 in 13 Albertans who have been hospitalized due to one of these illnesses is children under the age of 9.
We come forward today on behalf of Alberta parents and children who are very worried. We're calling for tangible and real action at all levels of government to acquire children's pain medication and fever medication and to work collaboratively to restock pharmacy shelves. Our opposition caucus has been inundated with reports and cries for help from Albertans whose kids have gotten sick and who have been unable to find necessary pain medication. There has been a major spike in cases of influenza, RSV, the common cold, and COVID-19 among children. We know that the major metro public school boards have reported tens of thousands of students being absent due to illness. This prompted our colleague and NDP Deputy Leader and Education critic Sarah Hoffman to write to the UCP Education and Health Ministers yesterday, demanding that they develop an emergency public health plan to further prevent the spread of illness and to keep schools open for in-person learning.
MLA Pancholi says due to the lack of medications, parents have been forced to bring their children to emergency rooms at hospitals where wait times have shot up significantly. She adds that the wait time at Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary was at 17 hours. The Christmas season has officially kicked off in Lethbridge with the launch of the annual Christmas Hope campaign. It's a partnership of 6 agencies coming together to help some of the less fortunate in our city and to ensure that they have a good Christmas. CEO for Lethbridge Family Services, Sandra Mintz, explains how they help during this time.
We put together gift bundles for children in need and families in need, and other organizations concentrate on food. And the thing that we like about our collaboration is we feel like we work so well together to create kind of a safety net. And it's very important to us to steward the public trust well. So we share a database and we share, lists to make sure that there isn't duplication of giving going on. And we're able to support each other's campaigns.
Executive Director for the Interfaith Food Bank Society of Lethbridge, Danielle McIntyre, says this year is different for them as a lot more families have been coming out in need of food.
Partnership like Christmas Hope really helps us to maximize our resources and limit the duplication of services by working together. It means that we have to do less than we normally would, in the sense that we work off of one master registration list. So we are not doubling up on hampers at one food bank or at the other. Instead, we are helping exactly how many people as our agency is able to. And that's one of the nicest things about the partnership is we still maintain our identity, we maintain our programs, we maintain our fundraisers. Each partner does what they do best to make sure that the family is supported as a whole.
Officials with Christmas Hope say they are working to serve about 300 adults and over 5,000 kids in the city with supplies for a great holiday season. A local family is giving back to the community after donating over 200 gifts to the Lethbridge Family Services Angel Tree campaign. Emily and Alex Geerligs hosted their first toy drive last year following the passing of their daughter Madison. To commemorate what would have been their daughter's first birthday, the Geerlings decided to donate to Angel Tree.
This is something, it started off, this is something that we aren't able to do for our daughter. And so it just means the world that, second best we can do it for all the kids who aren't as fortunate. It was a big success last year, and we weren't sure we wanted to ask people to do it again, but we had some friends ask if we were doing it, and we thought we better do it. And I think it's even bigger than last year.
The Geerligs say that they are planning to continue the gift of giving to Angel Tree for years to come. A special flag was raised at City Hall on Monday morning to honor residents in Lethbridge who self-identify as Métis. Members of the local Métis group were in attendance, but they were not there just to celebrate the beginning of Métis Week. Video journalist Micah Quinn has the story on the upcoming Métis Constitution vote and why the group says that they were not properly consulted on the building of it.
This process for the Constitution that the Métis Nation of Alberta leadership has carried out is not reflective of who we are.
The Métis Nation of Alberta recently announced that a vote to determine whether a new constitution for the Métis will be implemented is now open to residents who self-identify as Métis and are 16 years of age or older, and voting closes on November 30th. Dr. Adam Browning, the president of the Lethbridge and Area Métis, says he is not happy with the constitution as it currently sits.
It's not going to achieve nationhood the way we envisioned it. We weren't adequately consulted, and so we've been on the record. We reached directly out to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Minister Mark Miller to express our concerns with the process and the content behind this constitution. When I see programs out there for rental supplement for families in need that say vote yes on it, to me that's a sham. Nothing more.
Bridge City News reached out to Mark Miller, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations in Canada, for comment on the story, but we have yet to hear back. According to 2021 census data, there are 2,200 people who self-identify as Métis here in Lethbridge. Alice Bissonnette, an elder with the Lethbridge and Area Métis, says it's a huge honor to have the city raise the Métis flag and unveil a new piece of artwork which holds a special meaning to the Métis.
Tanze is the Métis greeting for hello. And it's part of our Michif language. Unfortunately, it's a language that is not as prevalent now as it was before, and we're trying to get it revived again.
The Métis flag was first flown in 1815, which makes it the oldest patriotic flag Indigenous to Canada, predating the Canadian flag by over 150 years. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The living wage here in our province has now been updated for our bigger cities. The Alberta Living Wage Network released updated numbers for 2022, confirming that the living wage in Lethbridge has moved from $19 to $20.30 per hour. Jackie Zalasak, the executive director of the United Way of Lethbridge in southwestern Alberta, says she's not surprised that the living wage in our city has shot up.
With the rise of inflation that we've got going on, everything seems to be going up. It doesn't matter if it's the cost of gas or groceries, everything seems to be going up. And so with all of that, we have taken that into consideration, and we've done our research to understand what those costs are. And so it's not surprising at all that the Alberta living wage has gone up.
Medicine Hat, Edmonton, and Calgary rounded out the list of Alberta cities with living wages ranging from $17.50 to $22.40. Over the past decade, Canada has incarcerated tens of thousands of people in immigration detention, including children and those seeking asylum. Canada is also one of the only countries in the global north without a legislative time limit on the duration of immigration detention, what many call a violation of human rights. At a news conference on Parliament Hill, Abdelrahman El-Mahdi, an Egyptian-born human rights activist who came to Canada hoping to live a life of freedom, shared his story about how he instead experienced imprisonment and was even denied batteries for hearing aids, which he needs for a hearing impediment.
Within hours of arriving in Canada, I was in jail. I was confused and scared. I had to try navigating through jail with a language barrier. And I could not hear anyone or anything. I didn't know why I was arrested and detained. I didn't know why I was put in handcuffs. I didn't know why I was in jail. I didn't know how long I would be there. I didn't know who I could ask these basic questions.
Former federal cabinet ministers Lloyd Axworthy and Alan Rock outlined their objections on the use of provincial correctional facilities for the detention of immigrants not being held on criminal convictions.
And it's I think, both surprising and scandalous that an agency of the federal government treats these fundamental rights with such disdain and pays no attention to the evidence that's presented.
Had I been aware when I was in office such things were happening, I would, of course, have objected and done everything I could to stop it.
A Veterans Day commemorative air show was cut short a Saturday afternoon when two World War II-era military planes collided mid-air. A word of warning, this footage may be disturbing. The Federal Aviation Administration says a Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress and a Bell P-63 King Cobra collided and crashed at around 1:20 p.m. local time. The B-17 was one of about 45 complete surviving examples of the model, which was manufactured during World War II. According to the Dallas County Medical Examiner's officer, the crash killed all 6 people on board who were volunteers in the air show. Many of them were airline pilots, retired airline pilots, or retired military pilots. So awful. In sports now, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are headed back to the Grey Cup to defend their title as Grey Cup champs for a 3rd year in a row. The Bombers beat the BC Lions Sunday 28-20, making the Bombers once again the Western Division champions. They are to meet the Toronto Argonauts, who stomped out the Montreal Alouettes in the Eastern Final for a shot at the 109th Grey Cup in Regina this coming Sunday. And hopefully the weather will hold up in Regina for that game. Here in southern Alberta, a much warmer picture indeed. Complete weather details are coming up right after the break. Welcome back. Well, we should be seeing some good news. Some plus temperatures are on the horizon beginning Tuesday. High of 3 degrees expected with a northwest wind at 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. Evening, still a little bit chilly though, -9, of course, with wind chill going to feel much colder. Into Wednesday, we are looking at a chance of flurries with a high of -1, down to -8 on Thursday. So a little chilly again with lots of sunshine though. Then look at that. We're going to spring back up into plus temperatures. 1 degree the high for Friday, all the way up to 8 for Saturday, and a high of 3 degrees on a Sunday with lots of sunshine. Should be a sunny weekend ahead of us with those plus temperatures as well. Now, the almanac tells us that the average high for this time of year is 4 degrees. Average low is -7. So we're mainly staying in that range for the rest of the week. 19 was our high temperature on this day back in 1953, and in 1955, the chilliest was recorded on record, which was -23. 7:41 is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening, or I should say this afternoon at 4:50 p.m., giving us 9 hours and 11 minutes of daylight. Okay, on the west coast, as we look at the highs tomorrow, 9 degrees in Victoria is expected with a mix of sun and cloud. Some fog in low-lying areas of Vancouver, but otherwise clear skies. 8 degrees the high there, 2 the high in Edmonton, and a high of 3 in Calgary, with both of those cities seeing wind gusts at 20 to 40 kilometers per hour and lots of sunshine. In the prairies, we are looking at mainly cloudy skies in Saskatoon, -4 the high. Periods of snow in Regina in the morning, a mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon, -9 the high there. And some light snow flurries in the morning as well in Winnipeg with a high of -3. As we look to the central part of the country, we're seeing actually, Toronto could be expecting 2 centimeters of snow. By the afternoon, we're looking at a mix of showers and flurries, high of 3 degrees. 0 the high expected tomorrow in Ottawa, and a high of 2 degrees in Montreal tomorrow. As we look to Atlantic Canada, after the post-tropical storm hit them, very clear skies there. 2 degrees the high in Fredericton with sunshine. Halifax sitting at 2 as well. Charlottetown, a high of 3 degrees, could see some periods of snow. St. John's looking at snow and rain, and also very windy conditions up to 80 kilometers per hour of wind gusts with a high of 3 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
The judge presiding over the public hearing on Rogers' $26 billion proposed takeover of Shaw says there's been an overuse of the confidential setting so far. Chief Justice Paul Crampton thinks too much of the case is being held behind closed doors and says that he'll be more vigilant going forward. The Competition Tribunal hearing is trying to settle an impasse between the Commissioner of Competition, who wants to block the deal, and the 2 telecom giants. A retired regulator from Texas surveyed oil and gas facilities along the Alberta-Saskatchewan boundary using an infrared camera this summer, and he says he found, quote, uncontrolled methane everywhere. Tim Doughty was brought to Canada by the David Suzuki Foundation, and he surveyed 128 sites around Lloydminster, Alberta, and Kindersley, Saskatchewan. Doughty says that he saw flares used to dispose of unwanted methane from oil wells, burning off far less than the 98% of the gas that they're assumed to, as well as flares operating unlit. Elizabeth Besson of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers says industry is on track to reduce methane emissions by 45% by the year 2025. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 189 points on the day to finish at 19,921. The Dow was down 211 to 33,536. The S&P 500 was down 35 points to 3957, and the Nasdaq was down 127 points to finish at 11,196. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $3.09 to $85.87 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to $5.93 US. Gold was up 6 cents to $17.7146 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $21.99 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $13.06 per bushel. Barley is at $9.91. Canola is at $20.11, and corn is at $12.01 per bushel. Live cattle were up 5 cents to $151.58. Feeder cattle were unchanged at $176.95. Lean hogs were up 53 cents to $84.88, and the Canadian dollar was even on the day at 75.11 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service didn't think protesters at the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa posed a threat to Canada's security, and there were no signs of foreign interference. But Canada's former Deputy Minister of Public Safety, Rob Stewart, told the inquiry today that CSIS used different criteria to define threats to national security, and the Cabinet decided the threshold to invoke the Emergencies Act had been met. Coming up, we speak with our foreign affairs correspondent about how Iranians around the world continue with demonstrations for democracy, even though the U.S. State Department is downplaying these protests by instead saying that it's about reform. That's next. Keep it right here. A bombing in Turkey, an air show tragedy, and the Dems have control of the Senate, at least for now. So much happening around the U.S. and the world, and here to talk about it is our foreign affairs correspondent, Lisa Daftari, who joins me from Los Angeles. Lisa, so great to have you back on again.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So in the U.S. itself, of course, so much happening. Veterans Day over the weekend, so many ceremonies, including an air show in Dallas, where unfortunately there was a tragic accident. So 2 planes collided mid-air. Lisa, do you have any more details on that?
Yes, this appears to be, as you said, a commemoration of Veterans Day. Many people in attendance being either, serving in City Hall or being just residents of the town or veterans. And these were 2 vintage aircrafts from World War II that happened to collide during this show, leaving 6 people dead, including 2 of the city council members who actually knew how to fly planes. Horrific. I mean, if you see some of this footage with the fiery, the optics of it are just awful. To have, this very symbolic event for Veterans Day and to have it end in such tragedy, very, very small hometown with so many people in attendance who, know these people, love them, support them, and came out to just, celebrate the day together.
Absolutely. It just gives me chills, just the thought of it. Never mind just watching that video. It's absolutely awful. Okay, so another explosion, unfortunately, in the world happened in Istanbul, Turkey. Lisa, what happened there?
This is a very busy area where restaurants and shops line the streets. A suicide kind of bomber was carrying a bomb that went off in a very busy area, also leaving, I think 6 is the latest number in terms of casualties, if I have that correct. But Erdogan came out and said we were going to find the perpetrators and their networks and punish them. This is unfortunately just another day in the Middle East. We always connect the dots here, and although we don't know who the perpetrator was at this point, or which, or if they belong to any group, or if he or she were connected to a one-off, what we call a kind of a lone wolf. Regardless, we connect the dots back to the number one world sponsor of terrorism, which is the Iran regime, currently under scrutiny for the people coming out in Iran over 60 days now on the streets, telling the world that they want regime change, they want freedoms, they want basic freedoms, and that their government is not suited to rule them, and that they do put a lot of their money in global terror. And when we see attacks like this around the world, that's exactly what should come to mind, whether it's in Gaza or the West Bank, in Israel, in Lebanon, in Yemen, Iraq, Turkey, elsewhere. The number one sponsor of terrorism is the Iran regime. And again, we're not sure yet if this explosion was connected to that. But in fact, if we do want to stop global terrorism, it's an important world event to look at right now. This movement inside Iran and the potential, perhaps, to change the regime in Iran.
Okay, so yeah, you definitely brought up a sore point there. I know for you specifically, Iran, the Middle East. So speaking of the Middle East, amidst ongoing those bloody crackdowns that have been happening by the Islamic Republic of Iran against protesters on the street. So the State Department spokesperson, Ned Price, I guess in a media briefing Thursday, incorrectly characterized the Iranian demonstrators movement as one merely seeking reforms from the Islamic Republic instead of calling it a quest for democracy or a revolution, right? So Lisa, what's your reaction to that?
Right. I mean, this was very disappointing, right? So somebody in that position knows better, knows the history, and knows that the Iranian people have done so much to define this movement as one for regime change and not merely one for reform. The Iranian people believe that this government is beyond reform. There's no way that terrorists who are butchering young people, young women on the streets of Iran have any potential for reform or change, and they just want this government gone. And they have done everything to prove that to us, to show that to us, to demonstrate it, whether it's in their chants or in their signs or in their videos. The message is clear. For the State Department to come out and say that, they're almost whitewashing the movement, kind of trying to move it back a drop and say, we kind of want to make nice with the government for maybe a nuclear deal further down the line. So it looks like they're not fully supporting the Iranian people, that they're still leaving kind of daylight between themselves and the protesters in order to have this kind of a possibility for some sort of negotiation with the Iran regime, and therefore they come out with this kind of terminology. So lo and behold, on social media, we saw this uproar by activists, by political commentators, by Iranians inside Iran, outside Iran, saying, wait a minute, this is a revolution. We're asking for regime change. It's not about reform. Take that word out of your vocabularies. And again, this is more of the same. We saw this under the Obama administration, who did not support the 2009 Green movement and instead wanted to hold out to have the JCPOA in 2015, which was the Iran nuclear deal. But we're seeing more of the same under the Biden administration, and the Iranian people and the expats and the experts are saying, no more of this. We want you to call it a revolution.
And Lisa, there are reports that the Iran-backed Hamas terror group is investing in its cyber espionage capabilities. What's happening?
Yeah, it's a great point to make, Jeanette, to connect all these dots. Again, more of the Iranian people's money going into supporting a terror group, Hamas, that operates in the West Bank, that seeks only to destroy Israel and to kill Jews. And here you have the Iranian people's money going towards this terrorism. Inside Iran, the economy is abysmal. You cannot afford basic pharmaceutical supplies, medical supplies, meat, eggs, milk. everything is inflated and it's very difficult to afford these basic needs. But then you see the government pouring these billions of dollars into these terror organizations. And here you have a new development that Hamas is beefing up its cyber capabilities. That takes money, right? So they are absolutely working on expanding that arm of their cyber army and will unleash these attacks globally, especially towards Israel and the United States.
And then, Lisa, turning our attention to the political front in the U.S., of course, holding its midterms last week. It seemed to take forever to count some of these votes, but it looks like now the Democrats may have control over the Senate. So how will this look in the U.S.? Will it change anything?
Yeah, it's a good question. There were a lot of predictions that there was going to be this so-called red wave, meaning that people have had enough of the Democrats, whether it's locally with the level of crime in U.S. cities, the inflation nationally, the price of gas and groceries, jobs, etc. And that was the prediction, that people have had enough and they're going to move aside vote beyond their political parties to vote for either independent or Republican candidates, red candidates. And that, in fact, did not pan out the way that they predicted. A lot of Democrats were reelected to their positions. The Republicans were not able to unseat them, despite their abysmal records, despite the reports that many people were fed up with the status quo. And we had also heard that a lot of moms, angry moms, were going to come out because they were fed up with the way that the school boards and the government handled COVID in terms of school closures and vaccines and things like that. So despite all of this disenchantment inside the United States, it looks like people didn't vote that way. With regards to your question, I don't think either the House of Representatives or the Senate will have a large margin on either side. So I think both are pretty much going to be even down the center. Maybe you'll have a small advantage for the Republicans in the House when all these votes are counted. Who knows, by the end of March, perhaps. And in the Senate, you have a small majority going to the Democrats. Yes, of course, this matters because one vote is a majority, and that's the way things can go. And regardless, you have the vice president making the tiebreaker in the Senate anyway. So, I mean, perhaps this is a wake-up call for both parties moving towards 2024, where the country just needs a change, and perhaps the status quo in either party is not delivering that change to the American people, whether it's about schools or about COVID or about the economy and so many other things. I think both parties need to bring fresh blood into the circulation and seeing, what they can offer the American people that will resonate with them come 2024.
And of course, in the U.S., on many Americans' minds is that of crime and also gun control. And Lisa, we're seeing that a report is finding that for the 39th month in a row, over 1 million guns a month are being sold in the U.S. That's staggering.
Isn't that tremendous? Yes, these are tremendous numbers, and it only indicates one thing, that people are still fearful for their lives, for robberies, crime, etc. This number, the fact that this is the 39th month consecutively that there have been such high gun sales in the United States, is based on the registry. So these are legal gun purchases, of course. And when we hear about gun crime, those are usually illegal, gun possession. So that's something important to point out. And I think a lot of people kind of are like, oh no, we have to have gun control. Well, there's a reason why people are using their Second Amendment rights here in the United States, and that's because of the crime. So for those people who want to vote for gun control, first vote for, leaders that will do away with the crime so that people don't feel like they have to run out and buy a gun. And that's exactly what it is. I think, here in Los Angeles, in New York, in Chicago, in a lot of places where home invasions have been on the rise, a lot of people are rushing to buy guns, especially in the post-COVID world, the post-pandemic world, where we saw this exponential rise in crime. A lot of people are rushing to buy guns and to protect themselves that way.
What a world we are living in. All right. So, Lisa, the U.S. has been facing a major border crisis as millions of undocumented immigrants are pouring over the southern border. So now the Justice Department has awarded a $41 million in contracts to a nonprofit organization to help immigrants fight deportation. So what can you tell us about this?
Think about that. We have illegal immigration on our borders. We have fentanyl coming in and killing our young people. We have terrorists that are using this opportunity of a vulnerable border to come in. And we have no way of vetting these people. We have no way of absorbing these people. We're putting them up in hotels. We're giving many of them one-way tickets to the city of their choice. We're giving them cell phones in many cases. These are all reports that we have done at the Foreign Desk over the last couple of years. And they continue to pour into the country in record numbers under the Biden administration. Now, the same Biden administration that does not have the resources to control the masses is putting money towards fighting their deportation, meaning supporting their staying in the United States when we cannot support them, we don't have the funds to do so. So homelessness is a huge crisis here in the United States, in our large cities. Crime, huge problem. Fentanyl, huge problem. We don't have the resources. We're not doing the right thing by, allowing more people in when we can't control them. They're going to perhaps end up on the streets if they are not, absorbed properly into society. And here we go. They are putting money towards fighting their deportation so that they can fight the government using government money.
Right. And then on top of that, Lisa, we're hearing that the Department of Homeland Security is not deporting violent, criminal, illegal aliens. Why not?
That's a great question. Why not? Because it goes against their liberal ideology. They feel great about themselves when they sleep at night, believing that they are letting everybody into this country and letting violent criminals loose. We have a problem with this, the criminal justice system as is. I know here in Los Angeles or in New York, you commit a crime of stealing under $1,000. They don't even arrest you. They don't even the cops don't even show up. People can do robberies. I mean, they hold guns to innocent shopkeepers and hold them up at gunpoint, and they are let go. It's horrific. And now you have illegal immigrants who are criminals, and even they're not getting deported out of the country. So it's mind-boggling. Obviously, this is attributing to a lot of the crime out there. And the rate of repeat offenders is exponential right now. That is what's very, very horrific, because these criminals are seeing that there are not consequences. They're back on the streets committing more crime. So when, for example, here in Los Angeles, you see many times when somebody is finally arrested for murder or stabbing or a very, very horrific robbery of sorts with guns and so on, it turns out that they have a record. This is their 5th time, 6th time, 7th time getting into trouble or committing a crime and being let go. And therefore you have this repeat criminal record. I don't know. I don't know when it's going to change. We were hoping that this election would at least be a referendum, that the people would speak and say, look, we need change. And then the politicians would be forced to really take a look at what they're doing and their policies. When they're getting voted back into office, they're now lame ducks. They are now comfortable in their positions. We're just going to have more of the same. And this will be, continue to be the jungle that it is, where people are getting robbed, in broad daylight in Beverly Hills when they're trying to have lunch. So that's the way we're headed. And of course, these policies, Jeanette, that we're talking about today are obviously adding to that fire.
Absolutely. And Lisa, U.S. President Joe Biden overseas in Asia, and he and the Chinese leader are to meet face-to-face Monday for the first time since he took office. So I guess the U.S. concerns over Taiwan, Russia's war in Ukraine, and North Korea's nuclear ambitions are on the top of his agenda. Lisa, this should be an interesting conversation, to say the least.
Yeah, so many people are upset that the conversation which took place this morning did not include anything about COVID. There wasn't any push on fentanyl or the Uyghurs or any of those important topics, but it was mostly, the takeaway was Joe Biden saying, I don't think that the Chinese are going to invade Taiwan anytime soon, and they understand what the U.S. position is on that. So many believe this was a lost opportunity to discuss and ask and really press on important things, that the Chinese are getting away with globally, but they walked away with this, pat on the back for Joe Biden, because he kind of understood what he said is he believed that the Chinese leader also understood that the U.S. has a position on not wanting China to invade Taiwan.
It looks like we are out of time here, but Lisa, thanks so much for joining us again today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Lisa Daftari is of the Foreign Desk, joining me from Los Angeles. Cryptocurrency has been with us for over 10 years, and this component of the financial world is still a mystery to some of us. We definitely hear about the volatility in the crypto markets and that there are winners and losers. And then there's a whole mining process, and what do we even use these digital currencies for? Well, to unravel and reveal more about cryptocurrencies and their connection to Medicine Hat and area, Ryan Chernisky, Director of Modern Mining, joins me today. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, Ryan, can you maybe give us a brief idea of what crypto or digital currencies are?
Yeah, so digital currencies started back in 2009 with Bitcoin. So it's been with us for about 13 years now. Bitcoin was the granddaddy of all cryptocurrencies. To this day, they don't really even know who the founder was, which is part of the mystery and aura to it. But it's a technology that was put together with the idea. It was born out of the Great Recession, the crisis that occurred back in 2009. And it's basically an answer to excess money printing by the government. It's a private currency. And since that day that Bitcoin was born, there are now thousands of other cryptocurrencies. They are not the same as Bitcoin. Each has its own different use and case. But Bitcoin remains sort of the central sun, if you will, with all those other cryptocurrencies revolving around it.
Sounds a little confusing, almost like you need to go to a university of cryptocurrency or something to understand it all.
Yeah, the basics are fairly simple, but you're right. Once you dive down the rabbit hole, there is a lot of information to learn, which is part of what we do these interviews for, to try to explain to people, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there on cryptocurrencies. Some are valid and some are downright wrong, but that's just because a lot of people just don't understand the technology yet.
Yeah. So what are these digital currencies being used for right now?
So they're in their infancy. So I equate the digital currency space right now to the way internet back in the late 90s, when internet first came along. We didn't really know what the use cases were going to be for it. So in the world right now, there's payment systems that occur. So there's companies like Square, which have payment systems. They use digital currencies. The blockchain is the underlying technology for digital currencies. And if you, to understand a blockchain, all it is a ledger. Debits and credits, we've had those in accounting for years and years. Well, that ledger gets digitized, and why it's called a blockchain is all of the transactions that occur are blocked, and every few minutes they're added to a chain. So computers keep track of this digital ledger, and they all connect with each other, and they make sure that that digital ledger for each computer is the same. And that way it's called immutable. There can't be changes to that digital ledger. So that's, where things are evolving. Our payment systems right now, we've got Visa, we've got MasterCard. We will continue to use those, I believe. Those are companies that are incumbents. They've been there for a long time. But in the background, they're starting to use blockchain technology to underpin their checks and balances as they do their payment systems in behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this is private. So what do governments think about this, and banks for that matter?
That's the $1 million question. Governments don't like, particularly authoritarian type governments, don't like when there is something separate that they can't control. Even our own governments like to have control, so that there's some checks and balances and oversights. And Bitcoin has had the criticism of being used by the criminal underground networks and all that. And in the past, that's occurred, but that also occurs with US dollars, with Canadian dollars. In fact, up to 5% of transactions that are done in US dollars are considered illicit. So it's not like a cryptocurrency has is the only place where illicit activities would occur. Governments, I think, over time will start to embrace the technology more, but there needs to be regulation for it. So industries like ours, we're happy with the regulations. I think blocking the technology in terms of Bitcoin, it's actually that horse is out of the barn. It's been around for 13 years now. I think jurisdictions in North America, especially, and Europe, are starting to accept it. They would rather tax and regulate it, as opposed to somewhere like China, which has outright tried to ban it. But even to this day, China tried to ban to ban Bitcoin mining. It's still 20% of the world's hash rate comes out of China. So it's virtually impossible to ban it completely.
That's interesting. So can people like literally order a pizza with it? Or I mean, I've heard cases like that. I think it just depends on who accepts it, right?
There was a famous case way back when the guy tried to buy 2 pizzas. He spent 10,000 Bitcoin each, I think, for each pizza. And I haven't done the math today because Bitcoin is quite volatile.
Today it would have been worth $60,000 or something. It was like the most expensive pizza on earth.
No, I have tens of millions.
Maybe
of
even more.
Is what it is. Yeah, it's crazy. So the poor guy should not have spent his Bitcoins on pizza.
No, he shouldn't have. So you mentioned mining earlier. So maybe tell us a little bit more about how these currencies are mined or created.
Yeah. So if you look at our currency right now, the Canadian dollar, it's created by the central banks. So there's the US central bank, the Fed Reserve, there's the Canadian central banks. That's where our money comes from now. In the Bitcoin world, it comes from an emission schedule. So there's a protocol. What makes Bitcoin different is it was born in the private sector, and every 10 minutes, computers around the world take all of these transactions. They compute and they compete for solving a puzzle that's on the protocol. So there's a mathematical puzzle. Every computer in the Bitcoin network is trying to solve that problem. The winning computer that solves that problem receives Bitcoin as a reward. So right now it's 6.25 Bitcoins are rewarded every 10 minutes. So there's 900 per day. And these computers are what secures the network. So essentially, they use energy, and that energy is used as sort of a force field to make sure that that computer network stays secure, which the Bitcoin network is now the most secure network on the planet, secured by over 2 million specialized computers that are continually trying to solve this mathematical puzzle. So unlike the central banks, which sort of print money behind the scenes out of thin air, no one really knows how much the Federal Reserve prints every day, or the Canadian banks. They'll report it, but behind the scenes, it's very difficult to tell that number. In the Bitcoin world, you can tell exactly how many Bitcoins are produced per day, how many will be produced next year. The end game is only 21 million. So it's a scarce resource. When something is scarce, it becomes more valuable over time as its utility increases.
That's incredible. Okay, so your company, Modern Mining, that's what you do, right? You create cryptocurrency, and you are located in Medicine Hat, right?
Correct. We're a Bitcoin miner based in Alberta, out of Medicine Hat. Yep.
Why did you choose Medicine Hat for a mining location?
So the Alberta electricity market, and electricity is our biggest expense in the business, is deregulated, but there are regulations in Alberta. So throughout most of Alberta, you have to pay transmission and distribution charges. Alberta allows municipalities to produce their own electricity. And what's unique about Medicine Hat is there are large gas fields in the area. So energy for Medicine Hat is produced through these through generators for these gas fields. And the transmission and distribution charges, which are one of our biggest expenses on the electricity cost side, is less expensive there. So, we worked with the municipality. Businesses like ours, bring in jobs, and that's what municipalities want. So they've been wonderful to work with, and we certainly would like to continue to grow in Alberta, stay within Canada. There are some difficulties in the Canadian system with we're trying to work with other jurisdictions are a little bit more friendly to Bitcoin miners, but we certainly would like to develop the technology more north of the border here.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think Medicine Hat or maybe other parts of Southern Alberta could become kind of like a hub for this new kind of mining?
I think they could. Yeah, I think the Alberta government has a mandate to try to expand our business within Alberta beyond oil and gas. We're trying to diversify our electrical sector so that it's not reliant on fossil fuels. I think Bitcoin mining, one of the big utilities of it is that it can help to balance out electrical grids. So as we move towards more wind and solar, the sun always doesn't shine, the wind doesn't always blow. And so what energy providers have to do is they build those solar farms and wind farms much greater scale than they need to be, because on days when it's cloudy and not windy, you don't have as much energy. So if you put a Bitcoin miner on site, then when there's too much energy produced, windy days, sunny days, Bitcoin miners can use that energy because it's in abundance. When there's no wind and no sun, there's less energy produced. We need to, turn on our machines at home. Then the Bitcoin miners can shut down. There's more energy to go out to the grid. So instead of these highs and lows that you get, it tends to flatline the grid much more and keep the prices stable. So there's one of the real world utilities where power companies are starting to recognize that a fleet of Bitcoin miners on site monetizes that excess energy and helps to reduce prices and costs for you and I at home.
Interesting. So is solar a viable power source then for your kind of mining?
It's coming along. It's the problem with solar, right, is our battery technology is getting there. It's not quite there yet. So it's great when the sun's shining, but what do you do at nighttime when all of a sudden the electricity disappears? The miners we use, they're very expensive. So they like to be online 24/7, 365. So as battery technology improves, I think solar is going to be a much more useful in Bitcoin mining. But there are companies out there right now. I believe Square's one of them. Tesla might be as well. I think they're testing out large-scale solar Bitcoin mining operations. And like I mentioned previously, I don't have a crystal ball for the future, but I do believe it's going to be a strong part of our network in the future on our electrical grid to help stabilize things.
That's so interesting. Okay, so on the topic of southern Alberta, of course, so one of the big topics of conversation in this region is orphan wells. So how is your company or maybe others helping with a solution to this?
That's a unique problem to Alberta. I mean, we're in oil and gas, and we know there's thousands of orphan wells out there that need to be remediated. Well, the government, the taxpayer, they don't want to pay for it. Industry doesn't want to pay for it, but yet you've got thousands of wells out there. To my knowledge, no one is doing this right now, but we would be absolutely open to using Bitcoin mining to monetize the energy that's on site. And one of the beauties with Bitcoin miners is they're very portable. So you can take them, move them all over. They can go to remote sites. You could utilize that energy, turn that energy into dollars, use those dollars to then remediate the site. Each well site, whether it's $10,000 or $1 million, depending on what's been done there in the past, that would be a way where the taxpayer wouldn't be on the hook. The private sector can solve a problem. We can help diversify Alberta's economy, and we can get some of this environmental problem cleaned up. I think it's a huge utility use case for Bitcoin, which honestly, it hasn't even been looked at very much at all, but I think in the future it would be a great option.
So interesting. How big is this cryptocurrency sector currently?
It's big. It's growing from zero 13 years ago to over $1 trillion now. It's an industry that's here to stay. It is volatile. So like the stock market, sometimes Bitcoin and other certain cryptocurrencies get the reputation for a reason. Because they're so volatile, they're used by traders. There's good actors and bad actors in any business. And so we see that. We see a lot of volatility, even with Bitcoin right now. I think as time goes on, as governments get more involved, private industry gets more involved, public companies get more involved, you're going to see that volatility decrease. So we're about $1 trillion right now. It was up to $3 trillion at one point. So We're in a bear market right now. It's a little bit tougher in our industry, but the strong survive, and I think they'll come out much stronger as things tend to increase.
That's so interesting. How does somebody get started in it if you don't have it? Somebody just like Joe Schmo.
You could actually go online. It's much more regulated now. So there are exchange houses where you can open up an account, know your client. So you'll fill out some various forms, driver's license you'll have to send in, and then you can open up. So it's like a brokerage account, and you can buy Bitcoin straight off those exchange houses. Now, once you get a little bit more involved, you can hold your coins privately. So that's part of the interest in Bitcoin is instead of holding your wealth at a bank where there's third-party liabilities to it, and it has to be insured by the government and lots of checks and balances. In this case, you can actually hold your wealth separately in your own. There's I have one of them right here. This is a little ledger device, so you could literally have $100,000 if you want it on a ledger device. Only you know the codes and access, so there's no third-party liability risk.
That's so crazy. What do you think is the future of cryptocurrency? Do you think it is the way of the future?
I do. I think there has to be, for any new technology, there has to be utility to it. So right now there's probably 20,000 different cryptocurrencies, tokens out there. I think 95% of them will die. I think trial and error companies are in there, seeing what works, seeing what sticks and what doesn't. I think certain of them, and it's very much like the internet was back in the late 90s, the Amazons of the world were born out of that. And I think you're going to see the same thing occurring right now. Those 20,000 are going to get whittled down, but those that do exist and continue will get much larger. I think Bitcoin, the granddaddy of them all, will be integrated to, like I said, orphan wells to help that. It'll get integrated into industry. Greenhouses, for example. If you want to grow food more locally and not import it from Mexico and California, long ways away, you could grow it locally. Well, how about using the heat that Bitcoin miners produce to heat greenhouses and reduce the cost there? So I think there's a great opportunity to localize things in terms of food growth production using Bitcoin miners as a heat source. So I think there's a great future ahead of it.
Absolutely fascinating. But Ryan, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us and filling us in on the world of digital currency.
Absolutely, Jeanette. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. That was Ryan Chernitsky, Director of Modern Mining, Digging for Digital Values in Medicine Hat, Alberta. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.